welcome to another episode of Rupert and Pinchy. I am Rupert, that's Pinchy, other known as Rupert and Pinchy.
Other known.
No, that's uh, what is your name? Isaiah, and my name is George, and um, we are going to be talking today again.
Yeah, like
Uh,
usual.
yeah,
Hopefully.
you, yeah, you have the mute capability. Hey, I realized on one of our episodes, Pinchy, that I said sometimes listening to videos at 1.5 speed really helps, a person be efficient through their
hmm
day and get through a video quicker. But I realized that I said it at the end of the video, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, you would have to watch the entire video and then you're like,
Yeah,
oh, I could have
now
sped
go
this
watch
up the
it.
entire time? What is
Yeah,
wrong with
now
these
go watch
people?
it. Yeah, now go watch it again at 1.5. So, what's on your mind? What's going on?
Uh, well, me and my family just went on a weekend vacation and we went up north. It was pretty awesome. And we had some great conversations and it was a very great trip. And I guess I don't know how that leads to any specific conversations here, but it was interesting. I just wanted to bring that up. And then you had a baptism thing on Sunday, right? Saturday?
Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you did that. And I guess I don't know, I'm just trying to think. There's something that would be interesting in talking about probably in the
The
world.
highway that you traveled was level. It was a good road.
Well,
Uh, well,
yeah.
well, one of the things that occurred to me when you mentioned you guys went on a trip, and your mom and dad don't like, maybe even you don't like this highlighted, but it's a real adventure when you guys go anywhere. I mean, if you guys were to go all together to the grocery store, everyone, that would be a real that requires planning, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
And effort.
That's why we
Effort.
don't do that anymore. That's what we used to do. Uh,
What, go to the grocery store for vacations?
well, no, we would have to
Okay.
when we went to. Okay, Mom didn't have as much help around. When
Hmm.
Lily couldn't drive. And so she would have to bring.
She
Uh,
still can't drive. She is a woman, but after all. But anyway, go ahead, keep going.
shut up. Uh, I sorry. My mom and I and my sister and my brother would all have to go to the grocery store together because we also didn't have grandma around as much,
Hmm.
and so
Right.
all of us would have to go, and so it's like a train going through the middle of the the store, and it was always just a
To
lot
get a
of work.
to get a box of crackers.
Yeah,
You
and
guys all
people
came out here to get a box of crackers? What?
and then people would be like trying to get past us, like waiting for us to get past, and didn't realize that there was two wheelchairs and a cart all in a row, and so they're like trying to get past us while I'm last or something, and it just was crazy. um
And then if that wasn't fun enough, your mom decided, you know what? We're missing something here. Let's add a dog to this mix. Let's bring Leo along
oh
and
yeah,
just
oh gosh,
make it
you just
make it
opened
a
another can of worms of memories. That's
well, they're good memories, but it's
Well, imagine a service dog with anxiety that always uses the bathroom when you put the vest on, which you're supposed to put the vest on so that people don't decide to touch the dog or try and pet the dog while he's working. And so, in the middle
he's
of
working. Leo never worked a day in his life.
no,
He was a
and,
great dog,
and
but he was
being in the middle of Target, and then mom has to take the leash and run him out into outside to use the bathroom, leaving me and my sister and my brother in the middle of the store while she's running through the store to get out. It's just yeah, it It was crazy.
So so the reason I bring that all up is it's really it's not like mom or dad or mom and dad decided, hey, we're going to such and such. Everybody joins in and helps out to make the process work, and so that's what makes it so special is that it's really, I mean, everything is dialed in like a fine-tuned machine. I mean, I know there's
Kind
some
of.
things that don't fine tune sometimes, uh, uh, but um, but it's really awesome that you guys all work hard together to make that happen. So,
Yeah, it's a
and
lot of work.
it's a lot of work. So, but what you put into it a lot of times affects what you get out of something. And
Yeah.
so, if you put a lot of work into something that is temporary, um, and we have to put work into temporary stuff, but I mean, unnecessary and also temporal. If you put a lot of work into that, what do you really get back from that? You know, but you guys going off and having some time, and like you said, you had great conversation, which that is not unusual. That is like,
The
uh,
MO. Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of like pretty typical.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's those conversations always are helpful, and they bring the family closer together, even if we fundamentally disagree on many things. Because if people didn't know, you're Catholic. I'm not. I don't know what I would be. I'm probably Protestant because that's really the two distinctions. But anyway, um,
or Muslim.
no, definitely not that. But even when we disagree, there's a certain level that having the discourse at all kind of brings us closer together in a certain way, right? Unless we're being total jerks to each other, that seems to be the case. Is we're able to actually have discussions and stuff like that. When we disagree, and I think that there's a certain level where you kind of have to put your foot down when if there's um some absurdity that is never worked out, if that makes sense. But the ability for us to have different conversations is it's a really great and beautiful thing. But one thing that seems to happen a lot, which I was thinking about over the weekend, is there seems to be a lot of summary of positions and simple overview that doesn't go into the specifics that are necessary to go into. And so, um, a conversation that we had over the weekend, we recorded, um, as like a similar to the podcast setup that we did before with Ethan and Dad,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
but
Yep.
it was similar. And the thing is, because we have that recording, I feel like we're actually making progress, if that makes sense. Like, let me think through this. If you're constantly skirting around an issue, not necessarily intentionally, but there's a certain level that has to be done in order to get anywhere in conversations, right? You can't just go through every single detail of every position when you're discussing. But if you do that over and over again, sometimes you can't get past the outward shell and then to get into the actual meat of the issues. And so having that overview recorded kind of gives us direction into how we should talk about the discussion in the future. What do we need to accomplish? And so let me give an example of this. In the example is actually the podcast we recorded. Um, we talked about an issue that is kind of a touch button issue when it comes to me and your positions. Um, we talked about script.
What is that position?
Well, we
What
talked
is
about
it?
sola scriptura and
Okay.
about authority and things like that. And I think that if you saw the video, you would find it very reasonable, because most of it was just trying to figure out how do we navigate issues in the Protestant realm when our view of authority is different. And I think you would actually find it helpful to a certain extent. And So we were able to discuss um, some preliminary thought on the issue, and now I'm thinking about the recording and how it went down, and I'm actually considering different ideas that we talked about in it separately, and like looking at, well, what does scripture mean by tradition? What is meant by tradition on the Catholic side? How do we navigate tradition alongside uh and, and how do we understand scripture as tradition, or what is scripture? Things like that that are questions that I took from the conversation that we had. And so these are branching off. These ideas are branching off of the initial question and the initial discussion, and it's branching up into other areas that are important questions to ask and answer and figure out. And because we have that recording, we can actually increase, or not increase, but you know find a clear direction of where to go. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like I was ranting, but not ranting, but having a long thing. But I don't know anything about that.
Well, okay, so we won't uh, talk about the specific
Right.
topic that you guys talk about because that's not what you were. I was just curious about which one, and so and I think soul scripture and authority is really
One of the
a
biggest
truly.
issues at this point.
I think it's a truly fundamental one, and I'm glad it was that and not that angels have 5 wings and not 4 wings, and
Sounds like
not
a
that
fun
we don't,
discussion.
yeah, not that we don't have those discussions about seemingly
Small things.
unimportant small things. Those are still valuable to have. I mean, but so
Right.
I'm yeah about authority and so what I was thinking about is similar to that. Um, I was picturing, like, if the trumpet gives a indistinct sound, the scripture says, if he who sounds a trumpet gives an indistinct sound, who would prepare for battle,
Right.
right? And so then I was thinking about how I can't wait for the trumpet to sound because I'm tired of all the talking and people having their opinions. And it seems like at the trumpet is when everyone's going to go like, oh, okay. It's like almost the Lord saying, all right, guys, I'm done with all the discussion. Of course, that's not the reason for the trumpet blowing. But I was just thinking that that's going to be nice to end to disputes. This is the way it is. And, and then, um, and then I was thinking that there's kind of, and I was trying to picture what if the trumpet is sounding now, but in silence, and that no one really hears it, and and it's not that there can't be disputes. That's just normal. I mean, there's disputes all the time. That's kind of normal. But it just matters who's your dad. Who's your dad? Who's in charge is really comes down to have your disputes, but who ends the discussion? Who puts the end of it? But but I was thinking of all the as I was perusing the YouTube, all the various discussions. Holy cow! On one side, that's a reflection of how wonderful life is and all the things that we can
Hmm.
discuss and find important. The other thing is, it's like, okay, when Alice in Wonderland goes down the rabbit hole, she's going down just one rabbit hole. What if there's like a million
Hmm.
rabbit holes? you know,
Yeah.
and uh, um, and I was just wondering, uh, you know, how do we eliminate all the excess? How do we get away from that, or how do we weed through that? I was just taken aback a little bit about all the discussion
Yeah.
and all the things that I saw on the internet, and so
Well, and that illustrates one of the issues with internet and information is with the amount of information we have, there's sometimes a difficulty in deciphering it. And that's where the biggest difficulty lies in the internet, or at least one of them, is um, not being able to navigate. It's like you're in a ship on the waves, and there's just no end to the waves. They just keep uh, going under the ship, and it just makes it really difficult to discern. And
mhm.
that's why there's a certain level that we need to balance how much information we're intaking. I would recommend reading books instead of reading things online, or reading newspapers instead of reading news online. I mean, I don't know how much the newspaper is even necessary, but if you're wanting to get that information, I just feel like the written format is much easier to navigate and consume than the random articles here and there, just hundreds of things that pop up online on different issues. You need time for contemplation. You need time to think and time to um, critically think. And there has to be a certain level that you eventually come to conclusion. And that's the issue with where I'm at is I can't do that yet. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to close the circle, how to close the loop at this point. Um,
Well, that's you're probably glad that there's only 24 hours in a day then. So if there were more, can you imagine?
no,
And
yeah,
of those 24 hours a day, how much time do you have? I didn't mean to throw you off on that, but yeah, trying to decide. I'm with you that I think reading. Um, now you can fall into the same trap again.
right,
Um, you know,
right. Like
uh,
sorry,
but no, but reading is more. It does provide a lot more potential for learning. Certain words. I was learning just certain words like anthropomorphic is one way to say it. Anthropopathic is another way. And generally, when we say anthropomorphic, we mean you're making an animal have certain physical traits like a man,
hmm
or humans. Okay, but when you say anthropopathic, you're talking about their feelings.
right,
And so I didn't even realize those two different terms. I knew anthropomorphic, existed, but I never heard of that other one because I just grouped in anthropomorphic. I didn't separate the physical
right.
appearance with the emotions
Me
or
neither.
or the and that was interesting. I'm like, wow. Again, going back to some of the criticisms that we've had about not being maybe as precise in our wording. But so reading offers so much of that, and
Oh, absolutely.
I
I
mean physical reading a book. Now
the
that's
sorry.
where you can't do that as much,
Right.
and so it's not an insurmountable deal. You can so anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think something you pointed out is really interesting. You know, one thing that I think, one reason why I think C.S. Lewis is such a great writer is because he read so many books. Like he when he was younger, that's basically all he did is read, and it really shows that he's able to use his language so well. By because he has that um what would it be experience that built into him. And the thing is, people that are well read seem to be really good at expressing ideas, or can be. It depends
Hmm.
on on who we're talking about, but like Michael Knowles, for instance, the reason why he's so compelling for me is because he's so well read. Um, at least he is an example of that.
Well, you know what? You know another similarity between uh, similarity between Knowles and C.S. Lewis is C.S. Lewis. Another thing that makes him so effective in what is our interest, and that's things about God, is that he was an atheist,
oh yeah, that's
or
true.
at least an agnostic, and so he's wrestled through a lot of things and came out on the other side. And so when he talks about the tendency of, um, it seems like there's a moral good that's standard that's outside the world, and he goes into detail about that. It's it's can be more fuller because he he had to, at one point he didn't think there was such a moral standard,
Right.
but in his honesty he recognized that there must be. And so he wrestled with it, and that makes him such a good communicator. And then his education,
Yeah.
and then same with Knowles. He was kind of a um, agnostic, not a true atheist, but he came back to the faith later, and so that just makes it sometimes can make a person when they've been on the other side. Sometimes it can make them have a certain insight, but if that insight is backed up with also education and good what a person would be called you could call it catechizing, or you could call it uh, just call it your formation, the formation, your faith formation, you know.
Yeah.
um
You know
so
what's neat?
so what?
Michael Knowles and C.S. Lewis were convinced by the same argument.
Were they?
Yeah, they both, if I remember correctly, they both were convinced by the ontological argument. Both Michael Knowles and C.S. Lewis. Which is interesting because it didn't just come naturally, like, oh, here's this argument, therefore they became a Christian. But there was a lot more other, uh, there was a lot more to it, things that kept leading them to uh, closer and closer to the truth. And the ontological argument eventually was used, and then they were like, yeah, this is true. But it's interesting just to point that out. Another similarity that they both were convinced by the same argument, which I thought was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and going back to the thread that you're going on is with just being formed with a lot of reading and good discussion like you guys had, and some of the real benefits of having discussions with those you don't agree with is that it helps your virtue. It gives you an opportunity to work on your virtue
Yeah,
of
that's also true.
patience, and um, courage, because like you said, there's sometimes that you have to say you have to be willing to offend, but um, there's always people so willing to offend that never want to use patience,
Right.
and there's those people who always want to use patience because they never want to offend, and it's like you can't. It's that's where prudence says there's times that you have to. There's a point that you have to make, and it has to be said. So,
Right.
um,
There's a time for everything.
yeah. So,
Well, and the thing is, you can't be a pushover because that doesn't lead to anything productive, and
mhm.
that's when patience is taken to such an extreme that it's would it be laziness? I don't know if it would be laziness, but it would be extreme difficulty in actually expressing your opinion. And then there's on the other side where it's so easy to express your opinion that you become impatient and just want to get your idea out there. And so you have to have that balance of one, I'm actually trying to learn here. I'm not just trying to voice my opinion. Two, I'm going to do it in a good manner so that other people learn from this conversation too. And so you kind of have to have both mentalities of, well, when I'm is what I'm saying even helpful to the conversation, and how can I understand their point of view? It's like we kind of have to look at those discussions without having those extremes. And so, you know, we over time that starts to become easier if you
Mm-hmm.
are addressing opposing views and bringing up opposing views and going back and forth in joy of the truth and in love. It becomes easier over time. And that's something that I
Mm-hmm.
really appreciated is it sharpens, and iron sharpens iron, like the scripture says. And so that's one thing that I feel we get out of it a lot of the times is a continual sharpening of uh, having more precise language, acting better, having better you know attitudes and discussions. And so one example of this, which I don't want to open another discussion, but when it comes to Calvinism or Reformed, the Reformed view of predestination, over time, my ability to, or my grasping of their position makes it easier for me to um, point out where I disagree with it. And even though I fundamentally disagree with it, and so do you, I'm finding it easier and easier to have those discussions because I'm getting a little bit more foundation or an understanding from both points of view. And so if you have that, even in things that you disagree, it starts to sharpen the way that you talk about things, um, the level of patience you have with people that hold that position, and the love and uh, the showing of love that happens as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, then I was also thinking that it God is interested in not well. Let me put it this way: if you look at the church is founded in a family, not in a college. What I mean by that is that if we're always seeking knowledge and it matters where we seek it sometimes. I'm not against college, so don't misunderstand me out there. But I'm just thinking uh, that the goal is not that everyone is a professor at college. The goal is that everyone's a functioning, happy, well-adjusted, well-connected member of a family.
Hmm.
And sometimes knowledge unites, but sometimes it divides. And then sometimes not only that, it occupies our time in unnecessary things, perhaps, or they may be necessary. If someone said you brought up Calvinism, and like you said, I think is really good. The more you listen, more you kind of study it and try to understand what is being said,
Right.
the better you're capable of asking the pointed question of maybe that might show or reveal a falsehood or a misstep, let's just say, and so and then also like you were saying, also not only knowing the material but also just listening to the other person,
Yeah.
because sometimes a person has an idea about a certain doctrine or belief, but it's based on there's a turning point that turns them that way because they have a misunderstanding somewhere along the way, and you go like, well, what do you mean by that? Because if I were what do you think about this? And then they go, oh, I've never thought about it that way. If we're willing to listen,
Yeah.
and really hear what they're saying. Because sometimes what is being said is not really what they're saying. If you just look at the words of what they're saying, what is causing them to think that way. Um, that's a tricky thing to go into, and I don't want to go into that. But like you said, to understand uh, the position, um, or the whatever doctrine you're talking about better. I mean, that goes without saying, right? If you know it better. But if I'm going to study Calvinism just to prove Calvinism, or if I'm going to study Calvinism just to
Disprove it.
disprove Calvinism, then I've already got a pre-programmed method, and uh,
Yeah.
and I'm going to probably miss something, right?
Right. Well, and I really appreciate going through the actual literature of the Reformed tradition at this college because I'm actually getting information from the people themselves that are some of the founders or people that, uh, what would you call it, led this point of view. And it's really nice going through their actual words and stuff like that. And something similar is me and a friend um, are going to be going through City of God, and that's a big project to go through City of God. But one reason why I want to do that is because I want to read Augustine's uh, point of view on things. I want to read parts that people constantly refer to, but me not having read it, I don't actually know what he said. I don't know what the context is in which he said these things. And I really like going back and reading Augustine because he's referred to a lot in the Reformed as well as the Catholic view. But it's kind of funny because everyone talks about Augustine, no matter. I mean, I guess there's a couple of groups that don't like talking about Augustine, but that seems to be somebody that people really like talking about. And I love Augustine's writings. I totally get why people love him so much. But having getting more information and reading the primary sources, very helpful because I'm not just getting people's interpretation. I'm getting um, their own positions, how they put it. I get to follow their argument, their actual argument, and I feel like I don't get as much of a spin as I would normally find. And the thing is, not everyone that uh, cites a position that let's say that you're opposed to a position, not everyone that um like explains that position but disagrees with it is lying about what the actual position is or is mistaken about what they meant, the person of the opposing position. But it's hard to know that sometimes.
Yeah.
Even people with the greatest intentions can slip up and make that mistake. And um it's unfortunate when that happens, and we all have to be willing to admit it. Um, but you can't always um, avoid that.
Yeah. Well, and and then like you said, with you're going back to the sources, because there's a lot of people that claim, yeah, I'm absolutely, I mean, it's no mystery, I'm absolutely against Calvinism. Do I think he ever said anything right? Probably did. uh he believed that Jesus was the son of God, right? So uh but um but you can have five Calvinists and um say what Calvinism is, and you get a different,
Right.
you know, uh, a varied response of what they think Calvinism is, and of those five different views, there's probably one or two that are, much closer to the truth, and so closer to Calvin's position,
Right. The actual
and
position.
so if someone wants, for example, to um, speak against Calvin in his position, they should know what his position
Right.
is, right? And otherwise, they're not representing him honestly. And so
Yeah, and
yeah,
when you look at a Calvinist or Calvinist interpretation, that appears different from your view of Calvinism, then it becomes a whole confusing mess because you've been assuming this entire time that they've been saying this one thing, and then you read what is actually said, and you're like, where did people come up with this idea that he said such and such or meant
yeah.
such and such? And I think there's been times where I see that, and it makes me somewhat frustrated. Like, why have people been saying it this way for the longest time? Why have they been saying that they think such and such, but they've been mistaken this entire time? It's really frustrating when that happens.
hmm Well, and some of that, I would say, highlights the need for central authority. Even if you have a central authority, I mean, if there was a magisterium of Calvinism, uh, then you could go like, someone could have authority to say, well, okay, you're not orthodox in this teaching, so your teaching ability has been pulled from you, and so they don't have that. So there's all kinds of schools of thought out there, and so that makes it difficult when you don't have a central type of magisterium or something that even in centralized governments or centralized hierarchies, there's still challenges, you know, but the challenges are different. And so that's some of the challenge there. And
Yeah,
but yeah. So as I was looking at all these different uh, avenues that could occupy our time, and then I'm coming back to, I want to be a really good member of a family. I have no interest in being a good member of a faculty at at a college, but that that I have to clarify even by saying that, because um, there's there's the there's the false premise that a person that's focused on the faculty at the college, you give him you set up a false premise that he can't be or she can't be in the faculty, but also be a solid member of a family, right? That would be a false. You're setting up a false
dichotomy.
argument, dichotomy, and same with the person that just in a family. It doesn't mean that that family person is just happy-go-lucky and dumb. He's just happy to be, the fourth son or the second daughter or whatever. No, they could be very brilliant, correct?
Yeah,
So, so, but it's where, as I was looking at that, and maybe that's why, the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. If the scripture had just said the tree of knowledge, you could really attack just knowledge as being the problem, right?
right.
But that's not what the scripture was talking about. But there is something in scripture that always talks about ever learning and never come to the knowledge of the truth. And another scripture that says that the Lord catches the wise in their craftiness. And so uh, there is a tendency for us to want to control and understand, um, and that's a natural tendency. But because of human nature, uh, we we all of a sudden take it that this is my truth again. It comes back to this is the way I see it, and it's like that's important. A person sees things the way they see it because guess what? That's how they see it, you know.
Right.
But but are we willing to like challenge our presuppositions and go like, okay, maybe I can clean up how I see things a little bit?
Right.
But it seems like uh, there's just a let me ask you this question. Do you think there's more podcasters added to the YouTube and Rumble and everywhere every day or less?
Or less.
What would you be your
No, what do you mean?
initial
Like
thought?
that more
Numbers,
podcasts
just the sheer
disappear?
number, just the number of podcasters, I should say. Is the number growing or shrinking?
Probably growing.
Yeah, it's growing because everyone has an opinion, right? And so that's not bad
Right.
or good, but it can show um, if it's because it's growing because people are interested in learning and expressing some of the things they found, that's good. But if it's just people that do not have the necessary, if everyone's just sharing their opinion, opinions have effect on people.
Yeah.
If you can share wrong opinions and wrong attitudes and wrong doctrine or wrong understandings or wrong principles, and they could be very persuasive. And it just seems like I feel bad for someone that that if okay, just imagine somebody coming from another world or just another nation that doesn't have internet and go, hey, I want to acclimate myself to your culture. What's the best way? Oh, go on YouTube and go on Rumble and go on the internet, and you're going to know exactly how we think. That person is going to be like, I see everyone saying opposite things all over the place
Right.
and giving good reasonings for it, And
Yeah, it's like what culture exactly are you becoming a part of? Because there's so many cultures, and that's again another issue with the internet is because of how every single person in the United States, almost every single person, can go on to a platform and say something. Okay, I'm not saying that we should stop people from being able to speak at all, but
no,
I'm just saying that if you have that, then that means that every single possible combination of beliefs is accessible on the internet and able to be found. And so the reason why you have some groups such as Flat Earth um, groups growing is because there's more accessibility to information and the ability for those groups to communicate. Again, I'm not saying that we should stop people from being able to connect, but the point is just to say that because of how many people are on the internet and how many possible positions there are, it drastically increases the possibility that certain groups that believe weird things can grow, and as well as other groups that believe more reasonable things um, can gather into groups, and so you kind of have both. But anyway, just everyone has the ability to give their position, which can just make it a little bit difficult to actually what navigate the truth.
well, and so it may sound like, oh, you guys are for censoring. Absolutely not.
Right.
We're just recognizing that, or we're feeling. Well, I'm feeling bad that woe to those who are in the valley of decision, or those who aren't anchored, because you'll be tossed about by every wind and doctrine. The scripture says that as the time comes toward the end, and this is common sense. Knowledge will increase, and so what have we seen? Knowledge increasing, and then also uh, scripture says that toward the end, lawlessness will increase. Well, when we think of lawlessness, we always think of riots in the street, and that is lawless, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we think of the criminal element. We never think of the intellectual lawlessness that's going to increase, and that the intellectual lawlessness is actually more dangerous than the physical and the criminal lawlessness. But and so anyway, as I was thinking about this, uh, what is God calling his children to? To know him, love him, and serve him.
Yes, absolutely.
And and to and so I don't I do care what position somebody has as far as like on whatever doctrine, but and I want them to have and I want to have the right doctrine and the right beliefs. But I'm more concerned if they're praying.
Right.
I'm more concerned if they're going to church. I'm more concerned if they're and this is for me. I'm more concerned if they're receiving sacraments and grace. I'm more concerned that they're under authority. I'm then them having the right understanding of premillennialism or dispensationalism or whatever ism. I'm more concerned about. Okay, that's great. You want to branch out and study that. That's great. Okay, but are you praying? Are you going to church?
Right.
Are you helping out with am I being a member of the family and being a part of a family and contributing? Or is my whole time, you know, caught up in intellectual pursuits,
Right.
r- whether they be religious or scientific, you know?
Yeah, we need
Um,
to not only inform our minds, but we also need to inform our hearts and the and inform our actions. And I think that sometimes it's easy to focus on one or the other. Like a lot of people focus on the heart more than they should. A lot of people focus on the mind more than they should. But we need that healthy balance, and we need to actually live it out. And I feel like this is one of the biggest difficulties with a simple intellectual um, view of the world. Um, and this is something that is hard for me sometimes. Is sometimes you break things down so much that it becomes joyless. And we shouldn't have that. We should have both. We should have the joy of the truth and the truth itself. You can't have one without the other, really. And
mhm.
as Paul says, that if we have knowledge of everything and we don't have love, then we are nothing. So we have to have the love of God in our hearts and the love of others in our hearts. And we need to act accordingly. Absolutely, we need to act accordingly. And so I think that's ultimately what we need is
Well, and
God and love.
yeah, well, and so, but so everybody has we're all called to do this. What's weird? We're all called. Let me back up. In the sea of information and everything we're talking about, it always seems to me that the thing, destination and where it came from, point of origin and point of destination seem to be some really strong buoys, or I shouldn't call them buoys, really strong rocks or foundations of you want to go explore? That's fine. Tie this rope to your foundation and go explore because your foundation is what you stand on. Your exploration is probably going to just enhance your understanding of the foundation that you have. It's not going to be something new. If it is something new, then you probably have a different foundation perhaps than you thought you did. But um so so like you said, coming back to just uh if we cultivate our mind, we're going to be cultivating our heart.
Mm-hmm.
And if we cultivate our heart, we're going to be cultivating our mind. And again, it will come back to what is our intention? Is our intention to pursue humility and love, or is it to pursue knowledge for knowledge's sake, or and and we don't even consciously do that sometimes. But when with what you said, I didn't want to give the false idea that because in order to love God, you kind of got to know Him. So knowledge is part of it, right?
Yeah.
And so as I was thinking about this, and then you mentioned that there was a baptism this weekend on Saturday or last weekend, and that's the whole. Uh, that just brought it down to a very simplistic reality. There wasn't a discussion about premillennialism or or post-lapsarianism or whatever type of all these discussions. It was just a family gathered together and at a baptism. Now the interesting part of that, Z, is in that group there might have been I don't know. I don't know what the level of understanding of the baptism was as far as what people's view was, but you know what mine is, and so but that didn't even matter because everyone joined together. You know, we prayed the Our Father. There was a short message about the simplicity. Put it this, let me share this, and I don't know if we're going off topic, but the person mentioned that if someone from the outside was viewing what was happening here at this campsite, let's say a journalist from the alien planet Klepton came with a notepaper and a pen, and they said, "Okay, I'm going to observe the humans here. Okay, there's humans coming from the north. There's humans coming from the west. There's humans coming from the east, and there's humans coming from the south, and they're all just like coming from different directions, and they're all gathering in the woods. Okay, and then this one human throws this water on this little child. It says a few words, and then they go eat. What does that look like from the outside? Does that look like the strangest thing in the world
Yeah.
when you think about it that way?
Well, as the scripture says, that the foolishness of God is greater than the strength of man, or whatever it says, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Than the wisdom of man.
Mm-hmm. And then when it and then the person said that said, Jesus, the disciples were arguing about who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, and I'm sure they were thinking about maybe in heaven, but they were also probably including themselves. I wonder which one of us is the greatest in the kingdom of
Right.
heaven. And Jesus says, and this is after being with him for how long? And them listening. And he calls over a child and he says, unless you, and he's looking at his disciples and whoever else is listening, that's around him at that time. But he's basically looking at his disciples. Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. He doesn't even go into who's going to be the greatest. You won't even enter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pointed out that Jesus wasn't saying to become childish.
Right.
He was saying to become childlike. And so just it made it's like this is the high point of everything I pray for and hope for. I mean, I want to convince the atheists that they're using double standards, maybe, or maybe that their end, their telos of what they present is hopelessness and despair. I want to convince them that, and I want to spend time doing that. But to me, the summit of the mountain is in those simple things of baptisms, of prayer, of singing together, of family, and so I don't know. I
Yep.
don't know if that went
Excellent.
off subject,
No, that's
but
perfect. And I think that's actually a good ending point.
okay. Well, yeah. There's so much more. You triggered a lot of thoughts on in so many different areas. The pursuit of the seemingly challenge. I hate that word balance, but it has a reason. There's a reasonableness to it because I want to be balanced in my murdering. I don't want to just murder randomly. I want to make sure it's like balance can be so misused. I want to have balance in my doctrine. I want to balance in your doctrine. What does that even mean? Don't you just want the truth? Is the truth? Are you trying to tell me the truth is balanced?
Yeah.
And so it's always that challenge, that struggle that we have. But that's because we're creatures and we're learning, and and uh, uh, and sometimes we just get too caught up in some one aspect and ignore the others.
Right.
And when it all comes down to it, it's when you take all the things that a person can be involved with, what are the things that matter most? The two commandments: love God and love neighbor. And but anyway,
Yes. We
so
need we need to have both views, or not views. We need to have both things held at the same time, and we need to zoom out and have look at the big picture. And I don't mean just like look at the big picture and ignore the details. I mean, the details are in the big picture, right? And
mhm.
if you zoom out, then you'll be able to see everything in context of one another. Even if you have a knowledge about each individual part, that when you zoom out and look at all of it and how it all works together, that's when it makes the most sense.
Well, and when Jesus, would say to his disciples, and when he picked his 12, when he would say to the crowds, "Follow me," you know, he realizes they want to know, you know, uh, everything about everything, and he knows that they're wondering, they're looking at the scriptures to see, okay, how is the Messiah supposed to come, or what is he supposed to look like, or what is he supposed to do? What's going to be some signs that we could see? And he knows all those questions are important, but he's just saying, follow me. Because he could give them those answers to all their questions, and they're just going to have another one. Why not why they want to look to see it to follow him? And he's just like, just follow me. The simple thing to do is follow me. Because if I gave you all the information, you still wouldn't understand it. And then you would ask me another question. And I'm just asking you to follow me. And your questions will be answered as you follow. Into the in the timing and point that you're able to hear it, because even his disciples, you know quibble about what he was saying, what he meant by this, what he meant by this. Let's study this. What does Torah say? It's like, and his answer would be, just follow me, you'll see.
What does
Anyway,
it say about the Pharisees? Um, seeing you,
you
see,
do not see, hearing you do not hear.
yeah,
And
just an interesting
yeah,
correlation.
well, and it's a warning to all of us that we can think that we're trying to see, um,
Or that we
and
do see.
or that we do see, and it doesn't mean that we can't. We're not always questioning. Gosh, I wonder if gravity works today.
Right.
Am I trying to see? No, there's some things that we need to be able to stand on some firm ground, right? But anyway, so good talking to you.
Absolutely.
All right, more power to you. Is that what I'm supposed to say?
No. You always get this confused somehow.
I know. I got to go back to the simple things. Godspeed.
Have a good week.